This is the Irving Planning Board meeting on October 21st, 2021. And I will share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Bring the meeting to order at 7:02. And members present, could you do a roll call, please? Moonlight, can you, well, I can read them off. Moonlight Davis, Deborah Smith, Mike Schaefer, and Donna McNichols is here as a legal advice later on. Janice is our new member, but she's not here right now. Hopefully she can join us during the broadcast and podcast. And Sun-Hee is going to join us about 8 o'clock tonight. She had a previous commitment. I'd like to put the minutes off until Sun-Hee can join us because she submitted them. For mail, I only had 2 new mail updates. One was for a marijuana business in Orange, I believe it was. In Orange, in cultivation facility on, I guess it's Dukas 158, Governor Dukakis Drive in Orange. You're looking at doing that. And then the second one was an auto sales place in Gill, and those were the only 2. With that, could we, I guess I'd like to turn it over to you, Donna, when you're here. I know you've been speaking to Mariah today and about timing on the best way to bring some of the changes we want to town meeting. And also, we haven't gone through all of them, but there was about, I don't know, 30 questions from the, when they went through and looked at our bylaws and tried to make them, I think, grammar correct and some legal corrections. So if you could maybe give us an update on what you think our best way to proceed. Maybe Mariah she put together a timetable. Maybe we can go through that together if that makes sense. Is that all right with you, Deb, if we skip to that?
Sure. I mean, I think I would take a board vote to change the order of the agenda. And then if you want to move forward, review proposed code changes or review proposed zoning updates to the top of the agenda, it just makes sense to get a board consensus on that.
I'll make a motion to move the legal counsel input to the front of the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Donna, for keeping us in more legal than normal, I think.
That's okay. The other thing that I would just point out is under the statute allowing Zoom meetings, that any motion needs to be a roll call vote, not just a voice vote. The assumption being that some people are only listening and can't identify who's making what vote. So just from here on out, if you do a vote, it should be, you know, Joe, I, Deborah, I, you know, et cetera, just to be clear on the record. Mariah and I have had some great conversations today. She's done a great job with all this. I have to just compliment her because it's been a lot of work. And we did go over the timetable. And aside from essentially really Mariah pointing it out, the first ad was going to run on election day. And we decided rather than take the chance that the AG's office may determine that that wasn't sufficient notice because it's election day, we moved the first ad to November 3rd, which is a Wednesday. There's still the 14 days before your public hearing. It all works within the time frame. So we just thought that it was cautionary, but I think it made sense. Your timetable's fine, as I said to Mariah. The only thing that could really, it's a very tight timetable. So if in fact, the internet went down, there was, COVID in town hall or something, so that the select board meeting forwarding you your new bylaw amendments back to you to start this clock doesn't happen for some reason, then it would throw this all off. We don't anticipate that happening. It's an easy fix because you don't have a town meeting date yet. You just have to sort of adjust and do new ads in the paper. But that was the only issue that we saw with the timetable. Legally, the timetable's great. Meets all the standards of 40A Section 5. We talked a little bit about the notice, just making sure that time, place, subject matter sufficient for identification. We're going to broaden a little bit in the notice. There's changes to the zoning map, and then I think there can be a pretty short reference to the planned unit development. And then obviously you have to have in the notice where the place where the text and maps are going to be inspected. And Mariah informs me that's the library and her office. So I think, as far as pre-town meeting steps outside of your report to town meeting, I think you're all set with pre-town meeting steps. There's steps that Mariah and Clerk Newton are going to have to take after, if it passes at town meeting, to get it submitted to the AG's office. And there's a lot of documentation that has to go, but it's nothing that's not doable. It's just making sure you have good records of everything you did so that they can be copied and put in the package. If that's all done right and they're approved, then of course the effective date will go back to the town meeting date as to when these become applicable.
Okay, thank you. So tonight we want to try, according to this, we want to formally submit what we want for this town public hearing. Is that correct, Mariah? So
Yes.
yeah.
And I gave Mariah language for your, if you've in fact agreed that the draft of the new zoning district map is what you want to propose to town meeting, and the language in the planned unit development is the language that you want to propose to town meeting. I looked at both. I have no issue with either. Then you would just take a vote. The chair could entertain a motion to proceed under Chapter 48, Section 5, with presenting the zoning amendments for the new official zoning map for the town of Irving and amendment to add planned unit development to the zoning bylaw to the select board.
That sounds like a nice motion. I can't repeat it though, but thank you, Don. The only thing I was wondering is, do we want to add anything else to this? We had rewritten the introduction section. That was the first thing we did. It was the closest we could do to a mission statement. And then we've worked a lot, Donna, on marijuana bylaw updates, and I think we're pretty close to where we want with that. But what should we keep it? Is this a nice amount to present, you think, what we're trying to?
Yeah, both Brian and Mariah and I have had discussions around the political piece of this. You know, the truth of the matter is the legal checklist, even though it's fairly long, it's just a checklist. You just have to make sure you do everything on it. As Mariah and I were talking, I basically gave her some examples of other towns that tried to do too much. And so the meeting just got away from them. An example was in one town, they had a definition, changed the definition of agriculture to comply with the statute. And it was sort of down in the amendments. And before that, they started dealing with whether or not they wanted to allow smaller lots in one of the zoning districts so that it would be easier to get affordable housing into that zoning district. And that became a really sensitive subject. And there was a lot of misinformation that got spread at the meeting. And so that got voted down. And so once the town meeting turned like that, then every other just housekeeping amendment got turned down. So that even the clearest things like changing and or in the zoning bylaw was voted down because people were just in that space. So a lot of how you present all of these changes to the town is really, really important politically to get your 2/3 vote, because 2/3 is not an easy vote to get. And any misinformation, any confusion, and it's often confusion rather than misinformation at town meeting can defeat you. For instance, Mariah and I were talking about the order of the planned unit development versus the zoning maps. And if you did the zoning map first, and then the planned unit development failed, your zoning map would be wrong. Because you'd have the planned unit development within the zoning map that you just amended. So the first thing is the order of what you're doing. You want to put housekeeping matters first, then you want to think about your substantive matters. When Mariah and I talked about it, it made a lot of sense to put planned unit development as Article 1, so that if it passes, then the zoning map as it's presented is fine. If it doesn't pass, then you can amend the zoning map from the floor to remove the planned unit development zone from the map and still pass the map and at least get a new zoning map done. So it's those kind of pieces that become really important once you just get the process done. And if you present too much, people are going to be too confused, and at some point you're going to lose the meeting. It's just what happens. The other suggestion I made to Mariah, and I think she has a really good presentation prepared for this public hearing, I would repeat the same thing at town meeting. I would start town meeting by Mariah or whoever presenting what the changes are, why the town needs them, then go into taking any questions about them. If you start taking questions before that thorough presentation, you end up with people getting confused and the questions just going down rabbit holes rather than the overall presentation being done first.
Hi, Janice. I'm Mike. Good to see you. Can't hear
Janice, I think you're still on mute.
you.
Okay,
Thank you.
now, okay, hi everyone. Sorry, I was listening in and I just realized I wasn't on video, so I'm using Sarah's laptop, so.
Yeah, we don't have to repeat all that.
Hey, Donna?
I agree with you, Don. I think small amounts of material are better than, because this is complicated enough, really, and we've got four, well, is it 4 or 5 now? We got one, two, three, 4 locations we're looking at putting the PUDs. So it's probably enough to try to explain to people. So I don't want to keep you for the whole meeting, Donna. So but you think this would be a good amount of material to take to public hearing and,
I think for your first shot out, these are 2 major improvements to the bylaw. One's really substantive, adding a whole new district. One's just updating the zoning map. And I think it gives people a chance to understand the changes, ask the right questions. And then I think you'll have a good chance of getting the vote. I think if you add a lot more stuff, you're going to end up with a meeting that's 3-4 hours long. And people get tired of sitting around. And so, yeah, I think I would start with this. And if everything goes smoothly, then you're, good to go to start adding more substantive changes and getting the housekeeping stuff done. The other thing I said to Mariah is I really encourage my planning boards to basically, if there's housekeeping things, like some of the stuff that I noticed in the editorial, the review of your zoning bylaw. I mean, if you go through there and just pick the editorial stuff, like changing 40 where it says chapter 40 to chapter 40A and things like that. I mean, you could get a good number of those kind of changes done even at annual without taking up a lot of annual town meeting time, because they're just housekeeping. You can just show people their typos, their corrections, because that appears twice in the bylaw, this definition, or this definition appears once as one thing and another time as another thing, kind of cleanups.
like, to me though, that part of the reason we're doing that is to do renumbering of everything so it can be searched easier by people. So it needs to all be done at the one time. All those, I think all those changes, all the numbering changes anyhow. And then,
Well, yeah, maybe the numbering changes. I don't think there'll be much of an issue there. That'll be led by, you and the town clerk if you're codifying the rest of the bylaws of the town, as just a renumbering. But there are some in this change memo, there are some significant changes as well.
right.
So you just need to be careful. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where you're moving along with these, basically just typo changes, and all of a sudden you hit on something really substantive, and that you can lose the whole town meeting doing that. So when, all I'm saying is your housekeeping, do whenever. Your substantive, you've got to plan for, you've got to lobby for, you've got to have public hearings for. Mariah and I were talking about, getting little snippets of these changes into Around Town with little articles by her, so that, because I don't know how many people you'll have at the public hearing. I've time after time after time, I've seen nobody attend the public hearing and come to the town meeting with the most basic questions. So you really have to think in some ways of the town meeting being the public hearing. And if you can get the basic information about the changes out to the general public in ways other than just that public hearing, it's really a good move.
No, thank you. That's great. Great advice.
I agree.
And I think the other thing Mariah mentioned was, there are like 30 questions we're supposed to go through, and some are, like you said, substantial changes. But we could say we defer making that change to later and just do the numbering changes and the easy ones too, if that's, I think, an option too, if we want to defer some of those more difficult ones so that we don't tie it down at a.
Mike,
Or
Are
I
you
think,
referring
you
to
can
the
do the numbering, but I think if in fact you take this memo, I've been through, I think I've got 3 more questions left here. you know, I mean, the stuff about floodplain, you're not going to do right now. You're going to wait till the maps are, you know, so that's down the road anyway. I think things about chapter 44, section 53G are housekeeping. I do think that it makes sense to refer to the bylaw number, Mariah, not the statute. The reason I say that is because under the statute, what the statute says is boards, commissions, and committees may adopt rules and or regulations regarding being able to charge consulting fees. So if you just
Can we hold on 1 second? I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know which one you're referring to.
it's in here about 3 times.
Question.
2230-6.1, and it's in here about 3 times, but you can take that one. And what the consultant says is the applicant shall be responsible for costs of such advice in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53G, or the applicant shall be responsible for the cost of such advice in accordance with Section 230-1.4B of this bylaw.
Which question is it?
Question 230-030.
Oh. Okay. So to be clear, I think what you were going to ask, Deb, is we're talking about the recodification now. We jumped from one topic to the other.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just stop me.
Mike, I know the night we discussed the codification, you were having some technical difficulties. I believe Mariah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we did actually go through all the questions.
We
went
got
through
through
16,
part
I believe.
15.
Okay.
And I think there's like 35, 36 total.
Okay.
39.
I think you guys had the most questions about there was one about the sign bylaw and how
And I'll get to that because I
we're
really
not currently in compliance. I think that was the only one that you guys had big questions about that we got to so far.
But something like this, all I'm trying to point out is something like this, where the statute doesn't really give you the authority to charge consulting fees, but your adoption into the bylaw does. It makes much more sense to do suggestion 2, where you reference how you've adopted it in your bylaw, rather than referencing back to a statute that doesn't give you the authority unless you've put it in your bylaw.
Okay, that's a good thing to know because I think one of the ones that you all previously voted on was to reference the MGL, which seemed like the better option. But if you think that we should reference our own bylaw, then we can do that. Or I can't give you the authority to do that. But
all the statute says is you have to adopt it in a bylaw. So if all you do is reference the statute, you don't point out to the applicant or to somebody reviewing through the bylaw that it is in fact adopted in the bylaw. So that's the only, I mean, it's just little subtle things like that. As for the sign,
Donna, before you jump on, I just want to make sure for the minute. So you're saying for that question, our answer to that should be number 2.
I would answer 2.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it's both are legal. I don't want to make it sound like it's a major thing. It's not. In some ways, it's just housekeeping, but it's just a little nuance already showing the applicant that you've in fact done what the bylaw, what the statute instructs you to do in order to be able to charge the fee. That's all.
can I just offer, Janice, because you haven't been on previous meetings, what we're looking at is we had a company come in and review our existing bylaws and give us feedback on different legal changes. And we're not just doing this for zoning, we're doing this for all of the town's bylaws. And like Mike said, they'll be renumbered and organized, and then they'll be accessible online for people to kind of search through. So what we're looking at is a series of questions that the company asked us of, this is what currently your bylaw says. Here's some either mistakes or changes we identified. would you like to make this change that we suggested, yes or no, or select which change you'd like to make?
Okay, now I'm catching on. All right, I kind of was catching on before, but you explained it, so it's, thank you.
Understanding that this submission to select boards or others for the general bylaws is only a majority vote at town meeting, where all of these changes to the zoning is a 2/3, you have to have a public hearing and everything.
Okay.
To make these changes to zoning, you have to go through your whole zoning amendment process, including changing the numbers. Where for the other town bylaws, they just can submit it to town meeting for a majority vote.
Well, we're special, aren't we?
You are special. There was one on the solar bylaw that I just have to make a comment on, because it struck me, Mariah, one of the ones on the solar bylaw, question 230-020.
The site as of right citing?
Yeah. Both the bylaw and the recommended language, the last sentence says projects cannot be prohibited, but can be reasonably regulated. I don't know why that's in there.
Are you saying that it should be just taken out completely?
I would. I mean, there may be some projects that you can't prohibit, but why would you put that in your bylaw?
Would you recommend that the planning board have it just say projects can be reasonably regulated by the building inspector?
I wouldn't. I would just have this be subject to site plan review to determine conformance with this bylaw, period.
All right, the planning board can take that into consideration when we get to that question.
Yeah, just discuss it and stuff. But, I mean, if you can't turn it down, the law is going to say that. But say somebody brings in a site plan review where they've got one giant square on 50 acres and say, we're going to throw solar panels in that. Here's our site plan. I mean, you want to be able to send them back to the drawing board. Site plan review or not, that's not acceptable. That's not adequate. That's not by right permitting. That's just by, incompetence, not putting a good project before you. So, I mean, I just don't like that language. I think it's just too limiting and there's no reason for it. If the law says you can't turn it down, then you won't turn it down. But I don't think you have to have it in your bylaw. Anyway, the sign regulation. In case anybody's wants to look up the Reed versus the town of Gilbert case, there's a typo in the questions. Reed is spelled R-E-E-D, not R-E-I-D. So if you're looking for it, it's hard to find with that spelling mistake. And what happened in that case, in Arizona, a pastor had a church that moved around. It was in grocery store parking lots, various community halls. It moved around. It wasn't in one location. So he put up signs around town whenever he was going to have a service, advertising all over town where the service would be located that week. And the town of Gilbert had a zoning bylaw that said that signs like that could only be put up for this amount of time and could only be this size and had to be taken down within 24 hours of the event. And it didn't apply to other signs that were similar. And what the Supreme Court of the United States said is, look, you can't regulate signs by content. You can only regulate signs by size, by time, but not by the content of what the sign says. And so when I was looking at your bylaw, I think the consultant's right. I think that there's some issues. I think this is going to take a lot more than just a quick fix at town meeting. I think this is going to be one of the substantive zoning bylaws that you're going to propose sometime when you get around to it. And I recommend strongly that you look at we could find some sign bylaws from other communities that the AG's office has approved. But where I think it becomes really obvious that yours might be challenged is in section 4.6.5, the exempt signs. If you read that section and say to yourself, okay, where in here is a political sign? And does that political sign vote for Donna? Is that treated differently than come to my church service Monday or something of that nature? Where in this are the Black Lives Matter signs permitted, or are they not permitted? And I think when you look at this exempt section, it's hard to answer that question because I think when they drafted this, they tried to deal in some ways with the Reed concept by calling signs commercial or not. But I don't think you get there by that, particularly if you look at the definition of commercials at the end of the zoning bylaw. So yes, I think that 4.6.5 would have a lot of trouble being passed today. And I think that the general sign bylaw for residential dwellings where you can have the name of the owner or occupant or the name of the building or other non-commercial message. What if you want to have a commercial message? What if you want to have, is a non-commercial message political? What about a political message? So as soon as you start putting content of sign into the regulation and regulating how that's when you become suspect and that's when you can be challenged. So
it sounds like we're kind of back to, I think, where the planning board thought this would go, which is we need to really look at the zoning, that section of the bylaw, and probably rewrite that comprehensively, not just as part of the code thing. I think I would recommend to the planning board that you select defer decision until after code publication for this one. And then you all can go back as part of rewriting the bylaws and really take a look at this. Yeah, and I will say that we currently have an application out for a grant to have a consultant help us with this. So if we got that grant, that might assist us in rewriting something like that, so that, you know, like Donna said, we can also look at what other towns have done that has been approved. That way we're not just flying blind trying to write something on our own.
yeah, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. The AG's office since the 2015 Reed versus Gilbert decision have approved sign bylaws. So there's no reason, you know, to try and reinvent the wheel here. But I think that when I was reading your sign bylaw and I was thinking, okay, where does political sign fit in here? Where do ideological signs fit in here? It wasn't clear to me. And when it wasn't clear to me, that gave me concern that that in of itself would raise a red flag for the courts.
Good. Well, thank you, Donna. I feel better that you've gone through it and explained it to us. And like you were saying, this will probably, we can do the clean up the housekeeping ones, and then the ones that are more difficult, try to present them in a smaller hearing, probably public hearing to people. So
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the questions you're answering in this editorial, very, very few of them are substantive. For the most part, they really are grammatical typos, language cleanup to just make things clearer that I think, and I think they're great suggestions.
good.
I would pull out the very basic, most basic ones and slowly but just surely just, you know, present 5 or 10 of those at town meeting as cleanup articles. Not at this one where you're doing the real substantive zoning, but maybe an annual, and then if you have another special kind of thing to get this kind of stuff done. And then the sign bylaw, floodplain, some of the other major changes, cleaning up the marijuana, maybe a touchy one that you may want to do that, you know, by itself. Would just happen over the course of years as you're just basically, this is a living document. This document should never stay the same. Every year at annual, it should be looked at, it should be thought about. The laws change, situations change, developments change, the economy changes, and all those things affect your zoning bylaw. So you should never think of it as we're going through, we're going to rewrite the whole thing and it's going to last for 20 years. I mean, that's what they used to do. That's why our zoning bylaws are so problematical. It's much better to have sort of a solid basic, and then you add your marijuana, you add your telecommunications, you add your solar, then you look at the back at the basic to make sure they all fit together, and then you revise your sign because the Gilbert case came out, that kind of thing. And if you look at it like that as a living document rather than just a document that you're going to do once, you're constantly improving it, but it's not such a huge job.
Donna, can I ask an off the cuff question?
Sure.
Would you say that the bylaws, the things that you're talking about now, are the basic things that the town should have to keep it going in its own philosophical direction? In other words, that's why you want to mess with the basic first, and then we can do these other things? Is that where you're coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think that, you know, I have some towns that want to prohibit marijuana, any kind of marijuana. So they're looking at going back to town meeting and a ballot question to basically not allow any marijuana facilities in their community. That's a political, philosophical decision that, you know, if a town makes, then no matter how well you write a marijuana, use bylaw, it's not going to pass because they don't want it there at all. So, solar, a lot of people, are really in favor of solar and alternative energy, but they don't want it in forests. They don't want somebody to have the right to come in and cut down 50 acres abutting Irving Forest and throw in solar, even though it's a great alternative energy source. Taking 50 acres out with carbon transference and all that kind of stuff may not be something that the community wants. So it's those kind of bigger issues around those bylaws that are really important, and that you have to know your community, as you're drafting them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Donna. It does change things a little bit because, by making these bylaws solid under the bottom of us, I'm hoping that we covered all the areas that we keep Irving.
Yeah. And that definition may be different for some people, but overall for us in Franklin County, it's rural, it's equality, there's certain things that we all love about rural Franklin County that we don't want developers to be able to come in and just cut down all our forests and, put solar fields on every single piece of farmland. I mean, you know, that's not why we're here. It's not that we don't want to encourage, it's not anti-development, it's just smart development that keeps the character of our area the way it is. Keeps our rivers clean, you know, all those kind of things that are really important to us.
Okay. Thank you.
So now we can go to the French King. We've got two people waiting for us.
Well, hold on one second, Mike. Are we done with Donna? Can we?
Oh, I think so. If you want, unless Donna wants to stick around.
No, Donna's going to go.
Thank
Nice
you.
meeting all of you that I haven't met before, and you know, you're doing a great job. This is a big job, so keep at it.
We'll
Thank
need
you,
your
Donna.
help again soon, I'm sure. Thanks.
Thanks, Donna.
Bye.
Good night.
Mike, before you move on, Mike, I just wanted to add there's some more people who joined. So Robert Jackson is on here now,
Didn't work.
as well as Andrew Vardakis. VARDAKIS.
Yep, this is Andrew Vardakis. I'm with Wood for the French King project.
Thank you. We're trying to add to our attendance list, and then Brian Smith is also logged on.
I've got everybody but Brian. Thanks, Mariah.
You have Stephen and Jonathan, Deb. They were on before you came in, I think. You have them?
Yeah, I have the attendance list. I've got everybody.
Okay, good. So, Stephen?
Mariah, how do I go away?
It should be where your controls are. There's an X. You should be able to select quit.
I don't have an X.
What about, do you see where your green microphone button is and your camera button?
Yes.
Is there an orange arrow on top of that?
No, there's a question mark, a little group of people, and a setting symbol.
Well, you can Control Alt Delete and exit the program.
Do what?
If you hold down the control button, the Alt button, and the delete button, and then you will select.
I'm on an iPad.
Oh. Can you turn it off?
That's what I'm going to do. Night, everybody.
Night. All right, well, there she's good. Who would like to present the changes that for the utility? Is Andrew or Robert? It's Robert.
Robert, you're muted if you're trying to speak to us.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, great. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Rob Jackson, Director of Development for French King Solar, a subsidiary of Ameresco. Maybe we could introduce the rest of the team. Would that be a good next step?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Drew, you want to jump in?
Yep, I'm Drew Vardakis. I'm a civil engineer on the project. I've met you all before at the beginning of the permitting for the project. Steve?
Hi, this is Steve Herzog from Wood. I'm an ecologist, and I was involved with the wetlands permit and also the original planning board submittal.
John Mancini with Ameresco. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all from our end. Just to give you folks a bit of a background, we had submitted a letter that is up here on the screen and a site plan associated with a curb cut that we've been required to do pursuant to Eversource Energy's request. They've asked us to for this curb cut to access their equipment, which is going to be sited pretty close to Route 2 there. And for convenience purposes and safety purposes, they've advised us to design this curb cut. There has been a little bit of coordination with the landowner. We got through that part of it. We've had a couple of meetings, one back in February to discuss their approach, and a follow-up meeting with members of the town, Eversource, and their consultant, and us as well. So we're asking for this curb cut change to accommodate Eversource's request to be able to access their equipment and do periodic operation and maintenance. We had submitted these changes to you folks, to the board members, and we've also submitted a DOT application as well. We're waiting on feedback on that application as well. But Drew, maybe you want to jump in and talk a little bit more about the details, the technical details.
Yep, again, Drew Vardakis here. Yes, what we had to do, as Rob said, was work with the landowner to design this curb cut access between the red lines of the landowner easement line. That's what's shown there in red. So we developed the DOT application based on the DOT driveway specifications, thicknesses, and some retaining walls that's shown on the side there in black and gray. So essentially, as Rob said, we went out there and met with Brian and the fire chief and members of Eversource and coordinated this plan, which is shown here. That shows some grading, the required radii heading out onto Route 2. And as Rob said, this has been submitted to DOT, so we're just waiting to hear feedback and approval from DOT on this application.
I do have a question. I'm looking at it and I should have better understanding of it, but on the map I'm sort of lost. Can someone point out to me what I'm looking at here in the center where the red lines are?
Yeah.
Please.
Sure. Yeah, Drew, you want to jump in?
Yep. So on the left side of the screen, you have Route 2 over there. Yep. And if you head up north, which is up in the north, upper left corner, that heads up towards the French King restaurant, where the original site entrance is to the solar array. So this is on the southern portion of the property, which is adjacent to the DOT facility down to the southeast on the bottom right. So this entrance is coming in. We don't have an overall plan of the project available here, but this comes in at the bottom southern portion of the project, heading in east to the right.
Okay.
Could you show where the power line or where the actual line's going to run on this? From the
Yep.
there's a pole there now, right? There's one pole.
Yes, you can see on the left side of the page, it's where the cursor is there is proposed Eversource pole. So there's existing poles in the site, and then those are going to be new Eversource poles there, right where the cursor is. And then that UGE is underground electric, so that's going to be an underground conduit line that runs from that pole through the new driveway and out to the right-of-way right there. Exactly, that's the proposed Eversource pole. So that's where the power will come up, and then that's where the interconnection is going to be for Ameresco and Eversource out there.
I just had a question. Would it be possible to run more underground cable than just back to the pole, so we wouldn't see any poles in the access road?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to. Rob, do you have any input on that from your end or Eversource?
Eversource is, I believe that the interconnection point is across Route 2, the actual interconnection point. So the feeder will run above ground over Route 2 to the other side of the road, from what I recall. So the reason for that proposed Eversource pole in the DOT right-of-way is to access, the interconnection point. Otherwise, we'd have to trench under Route 2, and obviously we don't want to do that.
Oh. Okay, I didn't realize. I thought there was something about going under Route 2, but you're not. You're going above Route 2.
Correct.
So the underground cable, can you show me that again on the map?
Yep, that's right there. It's that line that says UGE. It stands for underground electric, connecting the poles. Yep, right there.
Okay.
I think we lost Mike.
I lost. Yeah, I just got back, but I'm sorry, I missed everything. I don't know.
Are you able to see my screen, Mike? Are you able to see the plans?
Yeah, I can see it now. Yeah.
So the UGE is the line that goes underground electric.
That is underground all the way then. That was my question.
Okay.
It's underground across the driveway, and then there's a pole here, and this is Route 2.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, Route 2 is off to the left there. And then where the shaded area is, that's the right edge, the eastern edge of Route 2. So that's where it comes in. And then there's a PL line that's running north-south, up and down. That's the property line. So all of this is happening off to the east side of Route 2. Nothing is crossing Route 2 to the west there. It all starts on the eastern right side.
I see. Yeah. Well, that's good. It is. So it is underground, way back to where that pole is. That's good. Good.
How much alteration is Route 2 is going to have to go through to make this thing happen?
If you define alteration, the Route 2 itself will not, but as you can see, there's guardrail that'll be cut there. So the driveway width is about 20 feet wide. So as you can see, it flares out there a little wider, but that's going to be a paved apron. That's a length of 10 feet. So the width of the driveway is 20 feet. It flares out a little bit there to have your access radii. The highway itself won't be impacted besides removing the guardrail just to allow for this connection to Route 2, if that answers your question.
It does. It does. Mike, you went out there and saw this, did you not?
Yeah, I
Mike,
don't have any issues with what they're doing. Yeah, I went there in February, I think, with Brian. I was lucky I made it out of there. It was ice up to my door panels, water.
Wow.
But yeah, I guess Brian and Mariah, you could help us, but we need to make a motion to accept the site plan as modified. Is that the correct terminology, you think?
I don't particularly know. That sounds good to me. Brian is out there. I don't know if he's actively on the call or not, but
Okay.
I think you could
Well,
make that.
I'll make a motion to accept the site plan as modified. Anybody second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we need to, now this time we have to do it. The way David Brule has us do it is alphabetically so that we stay in order. So who's the first one? Is it, I guess it's Moonlight, right? We go by last name, Davis, and then Janice, and then Deborah, and then, oh, then me, and then Deb's last. Okay. Moonlight, why don't you say your name and how you vote?
My name is Moonlight Davis, and I approve.
Janice Vega Liros, and I approve.
Okay. Mike Schaefer, yay.
Deb Smith, yes.
Okay. Thank you. It's unanimous. Thanks very much, you guys, for your patience with this project. It's been a long time.
Thank you so much. Yep.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Whatever
Thank you, everyone.
paperwork you need, we can, well, work with Mariah and I, but we should be able to get it to you somehow.
Yeah, I don't know if you've all filled out the town's curb cut application, but if you haven't, you should just fill that out. It's on our website.
Drew, have we done that?
Not today, but we can do that.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mariah, can I get a copy of this map?
Yeah, they're town hall in the mailbox.
There's one, yeah, there's one.
At town hall in the planning board mailbox, there are hard copies of their application.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you can't make it during office, like during when we're open, let me know and I can leave it in the foyer.
Okay.
Do we lose Mike again? Oh, you're back.
I think so.
No, I'm still kind of here, but I guess I'd like to go forward with what, your timetable, Mariah, and try to get what the PUD and the map done, and then put the other things kind of on hold for a little while. Does that make sense to everybody rather than moving? We have a few other things, Janice, we're working on. One is the 8 auxiliary dwelling units.
Okay.
And that is another controversial topic that probably we could present at one meeting or annual meeting. But if it makes sense, if we could go make a vote to accept the map and the PUD today. I don't know. Mariah, I looked quickly at your proposed map. I found one change, not a big change, but I don't, do we want to look at those as a group to see if we see anything?
I think we should.
Yeah, do you want me to just give kind of a quick overview so that everyone can kind of remember where we're at and Janice can catch up?
Yeah.
I'm like trying to go on my phone.
So,
Well, I do have one question though before you go on, and that question is, I misunderstood something. Earlier we were talking about the land on River Street that extends to the Mill River, and that you just added in. Did that in fact give people more land, or did they lose land because of the way you zoned it?
I don't think I understand the question.
So I'll try and explain it differently. When we were talking about it at our last meeting, you and Deb said that the land that the people had by the river on River Street, you extended it a bit farther because of the zone, or did you give them less land?
We didn't change the amount of land that anyone has. We can't do that. Everyone's amount of land stays exactly as how they bought it.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly what you're talking about, but what we might have been talking about was on River Street here. It was all rural residential, but we changed it to village residential where the houses are, because we felt like anything that's abutting the road there already has houses on it, and it's already kind of a village residential area. It fits the criteria of village residential rather than rural residential, which is much bigger lots. So that's what we adjusted on River Street. And then on River Road, we did the same thing where this side of River Road was rural residential, this side was village residential. So we changed it to all be village residential. So we didn't change the amount of land that anyone had.
The only spot, Moonlight, where there was a problem we found with the map was, and I'm not sure if maybe this is part of what you're thinking of too, is one area, I think it was Farley, we discovered that there was an error on the map and it seemed like an area had shrunken. And Mariah was going to check with the map maker just to make sure. It looked like somebody just moved a line one way or the other. And on one map, it looked like the area was larger, and then on another map, it looked smaller. But I think that was like up in the Farley area.
Okay, no, that wasn't, thanks, Deb. That wasn't what I was referring to. However, I think Mariah cleared up some of it. There was some question about the land, whether it was because of the way it was listed, that you would either lose a little bit of frontage, I think 100 yards of frontage or something of that nature. So I think we could talk about it later. I don't want to hold it up, but I was concerned about that a little bit. And I think that the residents, if we don't clear it up, I think the residents over here on the River Road may want to petition some more clarity on it. I just heard through the grapevine that people aren't getting enough of the right information so that they could feel a good decision is made.
No changes that we've made affect parcel size in any way. And the only other change that we made down there in our last meeting was we adjusted the PUD area slightly. So I don't know if maybe that's where residents, there's a little confusion. We did we did alter the PUD a little bit, and we changed the zoning a little bit in the PUD, but that was it. And in no way do any of these changes alter the size of someone's parcel. I mean, we can't do that. The only way you can do that is if someone sells part of their land. So
I'm wondering if what someone is talking about, Moonlight, because it sounds like you've heard the second hand of what people are concerned about. So I'm wondering if what people are talking about is land going from rural residential to village residential. It means that they have less minimum lot frontage to have a buildable parcel. Is that what they're talking about?
I think that's what we're talking about, yes.
Okay, so that shouldn't affect any, actually, I think this is with my edits, so I don't know what the current one is. Hold on, let me pull up the right one. But the, what am I trying to say here? The effects of this will not adversely affect anyone there. So hold on, let me find it. Making everyone car sick probably. So say, for example, Moonlight, I'll use where you live as an example. You're going from rural residential to a proposed village residential use. So right now, the minimum lot frontage that you need, the amount of frontage that you need to have a legal lot would be 225 feet, not square feet. I don't know why that's there. That is, if you wanted to create a new lot, you would need to have 225 feet of frontage. In village residential, you only need 125. So that allows you to have less frontage to create a lot. Now, I don't think there's any land in your neighborhood that could be further subdivided that has enough frontage anyways. I could be wrong, don't take my word for that, but I don't
Mariah,
think there's.
there is quite a bit of land that can be subdivided. I talked to Jackie. I mean, that was my concern. So.
No, I'm talking about in Moonlight's neighborhood specifically.
Well, with David Roll's house has 3 acres.
But he doesn't have enough frontage.
Yeah, he probably does. You can put your own road in too, which Jackie said. So, you know, that it could open this up to a lot of subdivision.
Okay, hold on. Can I finish explaining this? So if people are concerned that they're going to be losing frontage, they're not. What this would allow is 125 feet of frontage to create a buildable lot, which honestly, in the neighborhood of River Street, I'm not even sure if they have 125 feet of frontage. It might be even less than that, existing buildings. So this is trying to be more consistent with what's already there. I don't think any of those parcels down there, with the exception of maybe Renovator's Supply, has 225 feet of frontage, but that's not in the VR, that's in CV.
I think I understand, but unfortunately, I could not really verbalize to people some of what you're saying. So if I'm going to be an advocate for what we're voting on, I would at least need to have some other information that I could give to people to say, this is what is actually we're voting on. That's all.
So I would encourage them to come to the public hearing. And I have that map. I made a document that outlines all of the changes that I sent out to all of you. And I'm creating a slideshow, which I will, one of you or myself can present at the public hearing and potentially town meeting, which will compare the current map to the proposed map and list the changes in that area. In terms of things like that, you can always recommend that people reach out to me if you feel like you can't answer the question, and not saying that I can necessarily always answer those off the top of my head either, because oftentimes I can't. But if you're in a situation where you feel like this doesn't sound right to me, but I don't know how to explain the right answer, you can let them know that they can reach out to me and I can get back to them with an answer to their question.
I will act accordingly about that. It is just that we are in our different areas, the eyes and the ears of our neighbors. And if our neighbors give us a little bit of stuff about, we need to be able to justify what it is we're doing, or at least understand it enough to make an informed conversation about it.
Yeah, if you all have other questions, if there's anything that we're talking about that you don't understand, I agree. You should all be understanding what you're voting on. So definitely ask questions to make sure that you understand what we're talking about.
Okay. I'd like to thank you and Deb for what you did. And you've gone through a lot of crap because of this. I'm sorry if I was a part of any of that, but I think that it's really clear it's come down to neighbors in my community where things are going to be changed for them to understand what's happening here. That's all. And I'm sure that Farley neighbors will, if they don't like it, they'll do something about it. But it was brought to my attention around a couple of people in the neighborhood here.
Yeah, I think you all have the joy and benefit of having elected officials in your town is that you all come from your own neighborhoods. And you get to be, like you said, the eyes and ears and the speaking voice to your neighborhood. And so if people have concerns, they can come to you and say, hey, Moonlight, how does this affect me on River Street? And you can either answer their question or point them in the right direction of how they find out the answer. So I think, you know, what Donna was talking about in terms of bringing zoning amendments to town meeting, your role in that is very important, of being able to answer people's questions, get proper information out there so that your neighbors are making educated votes on what is being done. And if they don't agree with it, that's, you know, that's their right, but they're at least making an educated choice that is based off of facts and not just, oh, I heard someone say this or I heard someone say that. They can actually know what the changes are and what the effects of them might be. With that, would you like me to go over the timeline that I created?
Well, did you want to go through the rest of it quick so Janice could see all the changes? I did notice one typo, well, PUD should be added to the new PUD on your map. Could we go back to the map?
I can go, I kind of wanted to start at the beginning, if that's okay, so that we don't going through the map and then go back and answer Janice's questions. And so, what we're discussing right now, Janice, I think I had talked to you a little bit about it on the phone, was that the planning board is proposing changes, hopefully at the next special town meeting, which is likely to be in January or February, changes to the zoning map, and then the addition of a planned unit development overlay district. So the changes to the map, there are several, and I think I sent you the document that kind of compared the previous map to the new one, and that kind of outlines it better than I can do in 5 minutes. And then the red areas are the additions of the PUD. And that language, which I don't have pulled up, is a bylaw that basically allows campus style development. So if you think of a college campus or kind of you know, an office park where all of the offices were built all at once and they all match each other. You enter through one driveway. There's a consistent aesthetic to the buildings. There's good traffic flow. There's good pedestrian flow. The signage matches, things like that. Think of old mill complexes. Oftentimes they were like that, where it's multiple buildings on one parcel being used for like different, you know, different functions of the same business. So it's similar to a lot of those kind of metaphors. We are proposing five locations now. The renovator supply area, the IP mill site, the French King site, if you think of heading on Route 2 towards the bridge over here, this section, and the currently active Irving paper mill area, which is also along Route 2 by an Irving Center. That is what is being proposed, is the changes to the map, as well as the addition of the PUD and the bylaw. I know, Mike, you had suggested when I showed you this map, which this is the map with the updates that is based off of the feedback that you all received at the joint Board of Selectmen meeting, or Select Board meeting, a few weeks ago. And our map maker was very busy the past several weeks, and so he got me a few drafts before this that had a few things that still needed to be adjusted, and I got this one from him this morning. So my apologies that it came in kind of late, but I know, Mike, one thing that you pointed out was just that this PUD area, the new one that you've added where the senior center, elementary school, library, and then that other parcel that the town owns that there's nothing on, it isn't labeled PUD. So I could go back and ask him to do that. I know that you all had voted, I think, at your last meeting or the joint meeting to move forward with these 2 items with changes that were suggested, and then review them at your next meeting and send them back to the select board if they seemed appropriate. So I guess your goal today is to determine whether you want to move forward with these maps with the adjustments and the PUD, as well as the timeline that we want to try to stick to for the adjustments. The next steps after you approve those will be that you will, the motion that you'll be making, if you choose to move forward, will be to submit them to the select board. And then the select board would submit them back to you, which starts the official clock. So the other change I think had been requested from the select board and you all was to make Gun Street, both sides of it consistently a village residential. Oh boy, that is too much. So I did request that change, which was to make both sides of Gun Street village residential. Previously, this side was Central Village, which didn't make sense as there's like a kind of a ledge there. And so all of this property is really not part of this area here. Yeah.
Okay. I caught on. I remember that. So, I mean, yeah, I understand a lot of the drawings. So thank you, Mariah, again.
You're welcome. This is the timeline that Donna was talking about. The idea would be that you all finalize your submission to the select board tonight. And if you choose to do that, then I will preemptively write and place 2 ads for the newspaper because we're operating under the assumption that the select board has already reviewed this with you all and will move it forward at their meeting on November 1st. So I would prepare 2 ads for the newspaper. I would send notice to the Department of Housing and Community Development, the FERCOG, the Franklin Region Council of Governments, the Planning Board of Abutting Towns, and I would post it on the notice board. All of those are required by law. And then I would order 2 large printed maps of the proposed changes, and I would get those 2 printed and any kind of associated presentation material that we want. Copies of the PUD bylaw. We can make a packet basically of any information that people might want about this. And we would put that all in probably my office at Town Hall or the basement of Town Hall for people to view, as well as the library. I need to check with the library director still, but basically have one on either side of town in places that people are often going into, so that if people want to take a look at them, they can. And then we would also put all of the material online for people to access.
Mariah, I'm sorry, I was gone for a few minutes, but could you put your presentation in that where it compares the old and the new? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yep. And I'm actually working on what I think will be a better way to present that information, which is in slides. It keeps everything a little bit more together. So I'm going to keep working on that, and we can print out the slides as full page slides, and we could always include those in the packet. I think
Mariah,
That's good.
Mariah, would it be
Sure.
possible to do like a postcard mailing to the residents and just say, please go online to, here are the change, like, just please go online and view the change where, this meeting is coming up. Excuse me, here are the changes. Please go online to see them. I mean, I know the planning board has a budget for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you're all willing to spend the money, which, I mean, quite frankly, you haven't spent any money in quite a while, as far as I know, aside from the maps that we've been printing for this process. I think it would be a great idea to spend some funds to notify residents at the beginning, especially since it's the first zoning change in quite a while. People might not be familiar with how it works. I mean, heck, none of us were. So I think if you would like me, if you all want to request that I write something up and put that together, I'm happy to put together some postcards to send out.
You have to forgive me, guys. I am not trying to cause trouble here this evening. But while you were talking about it, I was thinking that if there was anybody willing to like for an example, at the library, that we could put out a little word that someone from the planning board would be at the library or at the town hall a certain time, so that if anybody was interested, they could come by. In other words, just give them no reason not to know what's going on.
So Moonlight, if we have one of the maps in my office, people can always make an appointment with me to talk about it. If you would all like to kind of run shifts at the library, you always could do that. And if you'd like, we could have some kind of, maybe I pick a night that I work a couple hours at town hall and I advertise that, or you all pick a time that you're over at the library or town hall to answer questions. And then you could advertise, hey, we'll be here from 6 to 8 Wednesday night if you'd like to stop in with any questions. Anything like that, you guys are welcome to do, and I'm happy to help.
Well, I'd like to talk to everybody about it and just have us really decide, because it may be something too much for everybody to do.
I think it's a great idea. My only concern with that is I'm worried that it would defeat the purpose of the public hearing, and people would come and see whomever individually and then say, oh, well, I'm not going to come to the public hearing. And personally believe I like meetings, just because I feel like that's where, Moonlight, you might make a comment and then that makes Janice think of something. So then Janice is out, it's a very give and take kind of situation. And so I kind of feel like that's the purpose of the public hearing. And I kind of want, if people have questions, I want them to come to that. So that way everybody who is there can hear the answers. My other fear, if there is one-on-one sessions with us, like at the library or something, that leaves that person walking away, and now our responses are open to interpretation. And so, it could become kind of the telephone game where, oh, well, they said this and they're misinterpreting something. And by the time the vote or the public hearing comes around, we have that situation, like as you were explaining tonight, where people were concerned that they were losing property. So I think having Mariah kind of be if she's okay with it, our go-to question answerer, and then really just urging people to come to the public hearing, I think to me is the best course.
Okay.
Maybe a middle ground of that is I'm happy to do, or I can talk to Paula at the senior center if she would, or at the library or wherever. I could do kind of, I don't want to say information sessions, but I could set up a table there when we know there will be a busy time. And I could sit there for an hour or two, do on my laptop doing my other work, but being there, if people want to at least just say, hey, what is this about? And I can just say, we're making some zoning changes. You should come to the public hearing. Here's where you find the information. That way, it might not be, information from one person's mouth where, like Deb said, you don't get to hear all the questions. But it also, like you, Moonlight, you want people to be aware that it's even happening. So maybe that's a middle ground. I often will work over at the senior center or library anyways if I have things on that side of town. So I think if the directors were okay with it, I could just pick a day or two to advertise, hey, I'll be at the library. If you want to see the maps and have someone show you the changes, I'm happy to do that with you. There we go.
Well, I appreciate that, Mariah. I just heard what Deb had to say, and I thought to myself, maybe Deb's right. Maybe I should just keep my damn mouth shut until the meeting.
Well, I was wondering, what if, like you were saying before, to send a card, like a little postcard, but like a week before the town meeting to like have them know this is in there so they can go back and look on the email or a link that you send to that before the meeting. How about, it's just an idea.
I wonder if it makes sense to have that go out before the public hearing, so that people, because the way it works, Janice, is we have to have a public hearing, and then after the public hearing, it can be added to the warrant for town meeting. So it might, and I like Donna said, oftentimes I haven't done it before, but my understanding is that not many people show up to the public hearing.
Right.
They don't information, and then they come to town meeting and they're like, what the heck is this? So it
Yeah.
might make sense to encourage, I think what Deb's trying to get at, encourage as many people as possible to come to the hearing where we can be in control of the conversation and really show all the work we've done, and then answer those questions in a public setting where everyone, like you said, everyone gets to hear them and comment. And then, because the reminder kind of for town meeting is you get your warrant. So
Right.
that, and the other thing that actually reminds me, thank you, is you all can submit a report from the planning board to the select board to be included with the warrant. So if you have, and Donna said that it can be very simple. It can just be the planning board supports these amendments. That can be like, it can be as simple as that, or it can be longer and say we support these amendments for these reasons. So if you have further comment after your public hearing that you would like to include, you can always include it in there.
Okay.
Right now, with this schedule that I have proposed, you would have your public hearing on November 18th, which is your next regularly scheduled meeting. My thought was you could advertise it for 7:15, which would give you all 15 minutes to get situated and maybe talk about minutes or basic things, talk about mail, whatever. And then at 7:15, you could have start with a presentation that's maybe 10-15 minutes. I'm happy to do it if you all want me to do the presentation, or one of you or multiple people can kind of take that on. And then after the presentation.
Thank you. I'll take you up on your offer.
Yeah, and then obviously opening up for comments and questions. And then my hope would be that after you close that public hearing that night, that you could finalize what you want and submit that back to the select board. If for some reason something comes up, someone says, I really think this should be, I don't know, something, maybe somebody says, I don't like any of this, I want it to go in the trash. Then you'd have to decide whether you want to do that or not, obviously, based off feedback. If you get all negative feedback, you can always say, we vote to not recommend this. Once the select board has it, it's really up to, basically the public hearing has already happened. So it would just, I'm trying to think. I guess you would vote, I guess it's on the warrant no matter what at that point. So if something happened and you thought this was a bad idea, I don't want to do it, your report would say, we vote not to, or we recommend not doing this. If you got feedback that said, we want to change something small, but the intention is the same, what the law refers to as a substantial change, then you can make insubstantial changes with that final vote at the end of your meeting. And I guess the point I'm trying to get to is you can finalize everything at the end of your November 18th meeting, or you could wait till your December meeting and finalize anything then. And I think you would have time either way before getting everything ready for a January or February special town meeting. So by having your public hearing November 18th, that gives you a month of buffer time to consider anything that you need to.
Good. The question now, simple. This is on the 18th a Zoom meeting, or is it a public hearing meeting? Are we at the town? Are we at the senior center or wherever in the flesh? It may be a silly question, but I don't know.
I believe all meetings are still being done by webinar, aren't they?
Not all of them,
Right.
but it's up to the chair. I think all of them pretty much are. But my recommendation would be continue it online. The select board has been waiting to go back to in-person meetings until we can have them be televised on the new PEG Access community television program. And I think every other committee or board is choosing to continue meeting online, except for maybe Rec Commission and Concom might have an in-person meeting coming up. Oh, that's not true. The Board of Health has been meeting in person. So it's up to you all what you would prefer.
What do you think, Mike?
I'd prefer to go with webinar next month. Maybe after that, we can look at doing like when they get the TV working, doing what do you call it, a hybrid type.
I think for right now, for me, I would benefit with the webinar because of right now I'm in Texas, so just for that reason. But you know, like person, but I can't be there, so.
I'm webinar all the way. I think it's easier. And I think by now, I know the Board of Selectmen has had quite a few meetings where they've had an audience. And I think our residents have gotten used to, you know, you call this number, you call in, you do your thing. And so I think people almost expect it at this point. So I say, why change it?
So Deb, tell me, because you're more familiar with this than I am, tell me how many people did you get at the webinar meetings opposed to the last town meeting that I went to? There was over 200 people at that meeting. Do you get that many on the webinar?
No, I mean, obviously not, but it's not, we're holding a public hearing. And I mean, I can tell you our last planning board public hearing, which was for the solar projects, had 0 attendance outside of consultants. The marijuana bylaw, I know Donna noted that could be very controversial. Our marijuana bylaw meeting, I think had, I'm going to go out on a limb and say 3 attendants, but I think they were there for something else. I don't think we had anyone attend the marijuana bylaw public hearing. I think we'll get attendance with these. But again, I don't think it's.
We have 1,000 max attendees.
Right. So there's plenty of room.
The challenge with the public, so I want to be clear that the public hearing will be online. The special town meeting that this would be voted on would be in person. All of the other special town meetings and annuals have been in person.
Right.
The only logistics issue with a public hearing that I have on my end is right now, anyone who I know is going to be talking during a meeting, I make them a panelist. They can mute and unmute themselves. If we have it where attendees can just call in, I can mute and unmute them on here, but if they call in on their phone, I can't mute and unmute them. So the only challenge that poses is if someone has background noise or doesn't mute their phone, it can cause some disruption. My hope is that we will not have hundreds of people. Would it be lovely if we had hundreds of people engaged? Yes. Is it a nightmare? Yes. So I think, like Deb said, I think it's unlikely that we're going to have that many people, but that I will give you the forewarning that it is a challenge because it's a public hearing, everyone needs to be able to speak if they want to. So that will just be my one forewarning, is that it may be a little bit audio challenging at some points in time if people are unfamiliar with how to mute and unmute themselves on their phone versus online.
Okay, so what we'd like to make a motion to propose the select board the modified map in the PUD bylaw. Does that sound correct?
Can you see this motion on my screen, Mike?
Okay, yeah, now I can. You have to
One second.
highlight it to me. Motion to proceed under Chapter 40A, Section 5, with presenting the select board the zoning amendments proposed, zoning map amendments, and planned unit development amendment.
I second it.
Okay. I'm going to ask you guys to hold there because I'm still writing. So let me just catch up.
Take your time. Take your time, Dan. I'm sorry that we missed Sun Hee.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm still out of sorts with doing minutes.
I'm sorry. Hey, you know what, Deb? Privately, you and I will talk, and I'll take it on sometime. I will. I promise.
I don't think Sunny's gonna make it. She said 8 o'clock, and it's almost time for us to adjourn now.
Yes, I don't think she's gonna make it.
I do have one question. Well, yeah, I guess I'll ask it now. Mike, so the one change that Mike had pointed out was that it didn't say VR on this updated map. Where are we? Here. Would you like to make that motion with that proposed change on the map if I go back to the map maker and ask him to just add that PUD label?
I don't think we need a motion for the PUD label to be added. I think we're all in agreement it needs to be.
I think so too.
Yeah, I guess,
Okay.
okay. I just want to be clear that if we're proposing the zoning map amendment, yeah, okay, I guess we're good.
It was amended, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it says
with
amendment in there, so I think we're good. All right, so you guys can go ahead and vote. Thank you for your patience.
You need a
All
second.
right,
Thank you for your time.
go in order again.
George Moonlight Davis, I approve.
Janice Vega, Leros, yay.
Mike
Yes.
Schaefer, yay.
Deb Smith, yay.
All right, it's
Did
unanimous.
you get a second on that?
Moonlight seconded, right?
I
Perfect.
second it, yes.
All right, thank you, Mariah, for helping put this timetable together. So,
I will move forward with that. Yeah, I will get that map updated. I will send those to the select board. I will start drafting the ads and the notices. And do you want me to move forward with sending postcards ahead of the hearing?
I'd like to.
That would get more people involved, hopefully.
yeah, like Janice said, if you had a link to the website and everything, it would be nice that they could go look at it ahead of time, you know.
Sure.
I would like to say that, you know, all this effort talking about how to get the people to come and vote and do this stuff, it may not happen, but at least I want the residents of Irving to be able to know that we did everything in our power to make them aware of what was going on. And I think that's where I'm really coming from more than any other place.
How about the around town? Is there something we could put in there too?
Unfortunately, the November one is, I think Jackie either already printed it. I can talk to her. Well, she won't be in tomorrow. I submitted stuff already for it. Usually by now, everything is already done for the next month. But like Donna said, so for the December and January ones, I can write like little blurbs of like, hey, there's some zoning amendments, the public hearing already happened, but here's kind of a summary of what they are. Ahead of the special town meeting, people will at least have an idea.
That's where I get my information, not the.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
So Mariah,
as well.
do you think, Mariah, you could have postcards ready to mail for like that first week of November? I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I'm going off of your schedule.
So yeah, I think I could, because I'll have all of next week to get all of this ready. So I think, yeah, by the end of, let's see. Yeah, by the end of next week, I should be able to have postcards ready and send them out the first few days of November. And that would give people 2.5 weeks to get ready for the hearing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, are we all set with this? Could we go back to the agenda quick and then So I guess I'd like to skip over the ADU. Those are the auxiliary dwelling units, Janice. That would be like if
Okay.
you were going to put in another house, a small house in your yard, yard, or an interior one. But I think these are things we want to bring up, but we'll have to figure out after we do this first one, which ones we want to bring to town. Maybe it's the annual meeting we choose, the ADUs and the marijuana. She thought the marijuana bylaw would be kind of a tough one too. Maybe that's a special meeting. I'm not sure.
I don't understand why would the marijuana things be a tough one.
Basing that off of other towns. I don't think
Yeah,
that
we didn't have any problems with the marijuana bylaw last time at all.
No, I didn't see it either, so I just don't know why we would have any trouble with it.
Yeah. Wasn't it unanimous?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I think
And
that
it
she was
was,
basing that just off other towns that she's had experience with.
Got it.
Okay.
And then the other ones are like to the at the back of the there's a copy of all our bylaws, Janice, that you should memorize for our next meeting, but no.
I'm smart, but I ain't that smart.
Back of it is
Yeah, passed.
It's not much, Janice. You can work it out.
the
Okay.
site plans and special permit plans are something that we want to look at too, because we had one special permit that it was only good for 2 years and they hadn't done any work on it for over that time period. So we had to reissue the special permit. So we want to extend that as long as we can. But that's about, oh, and then the other thing I just want to mention quickly was Moonlight has taken over for me as a FERCog representative for the planning board. So next time, Moonlight, maybe you could update us a little bit on what you've learned at FERCog, if that's okay.
I will do that. I promise you. I will be there.
Okay, good. Any other new business?
Update special permit section. Number of copies and digital copies.
Well, that's just stuff that we'll do later on when we get to that part of the bylaw. But I think we've got our game plan for the next few months, trying to see how this goes with the town meeting, and then we can figure out what we're going to do for the next meeting. That Donna gave us some good information too tonight about what she thought we could do easily. Maybe take half, I don't know, what did she say, 5 or 10 at a time, and put them into the
Around town or something. That's what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, my thought, and this is just my 2 cents, is I don't think voters would be overwhelmed by making all of the grammar changes all at once. I think, our voters are smart. They understand that changing "or" to "and" is fine. I think you could do all of those at one meeting and that would not be a problem. I agree that the bigger ones should be broken apart, just like you've all anticipated doing, is, some of the more controversial or bigger changes, kind of 1 or 2 together. And I think her point, one thing that she suggested that I really liked was doing a handful every year at annual town meeting, a handful of small changes to keep up with changing laws and, just updates. I thought that was a great idea. And she said that she's encouraging all of her towns to do that. And part of that is keeping voters informed of how zoning works, so that it's not a panic every time there is a zoning change. And then also keeping your bylaws up to date, because sometimes legislation changes or case law, etc. So I think you're all on a really good track. I'm really excited.
I did get afraid a little bit when Donna said that, and because I had never thought about it happening like that, that if you don't present things sometimes in a certain way, you could shoot a bullet in the foot of the whole meeting based on the political viewpoint. And so even the smallest things, you won't even approve because of some problem. So I think that we need to think about how to present it too, so that we get the best mileage out of this thing. I'd hate for it to be shot in the foot because we didn't present it properly. I mean, did I get that from Donna properly? Did anyone else hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think exactly what you were talking about earlier, Moonlight, whereas if people have misinformation, they come in feeling very defensive because they think someone's taking my land away or something like that. The more that we can have those conversations ahead of time to give people accurate information and answer questions and concerns, that way, like Donna said, and you're hearing absolutely correctly, once people start to spiral and feel like, whoa, this is way too much. And she said, you know, exactly right. When people get confused and they're like, well, I don't want to vote on something that I'm not understanding.
Right.
And that's when people just say, we're voting no on all of these. We don't care what they say. So
Right.
luckily I have two. But and like she said, we have to do it in the order of the planned unit development and then the map, because if people vote no on planned unit development, then the map changes. So we can change the map on the floor. I asked her that. So if, say, planned unit development doesn't pass, that doesn't mean that the other changes on the map can't pass. You would just on the floor make the amendment that it would pass without the planned unit development addition. And people can make any amendment on the floor at town meetings. So say they liked the map except for they really wanted Moonlight's neighborhood on River Street to stay rural residential, they can make that amendment on the floor, and if people vote for it, they vote for it. If not, then it falls.
Okay.
I think the other thing she mentioned too that I forgot was we need a 2/3 majority for things to pass the zoning bylaws. That's what she said, right? Whereas
Yeah.
other things, 50%. So. All right, well, I'll make a motion to adjourn at 8:50. Anyone second?
Second. Janet seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, Deb, for doing the minutes. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Hey,
Thank you all.
Deb, can we make a date?
You know, Moonlight, we got Sun He to take minutes. You don't have to worry about it.
But I mean, sometimes this could happen again. That's all. And
I know,
like
I appreciate it. I really don't mind. I like to tease Mike about it, but I really don't mind.
Okay. All right.
All right.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you. Have a good
Ladies.
night.
Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
Y'all. Good night, everyone.
And thank you very much.
Have a
Night,
safe
Moonlight. See ya.